The neighborhood was supposed to be peaceful when I first moved into Willow Creek, but like most people who find themselves entangled with an HOA, I quickly discovered that peace was the last thing I was going to get, especially with Karen, the self-appointed enforcer of all rules that seemed to exist only in her head, living directly across from me. It began with little things. Snide comments about how my grass was a shade too long, even though I cut it twice a week. Passive-aggressive notes about how my front porch furniture wasn't aesthetically consistent with the neighborhood. And, most recently, her obsession with my trash can. Every Tuesday night, like clockwork, I would wheel my trash can down to the curb, making sure it was positioned exactly within HOA guidelines. Wheels facing the house, lid closed tight, no overflow, and precisely 18 inches from the curb, as per the ridiculous handbook they shoved into new residents' mailboxes. Yet somehow, every Wednesday morning before the garbage truck came, I would find my trash can knocked over, contents spilling onto the street like some grotesque confetti, parade of coffee filters, fast food wrappers, and grass clippings. At first, I thought maybe it was raccoons, or even some mischievous teenagers. But after setting up a small security camera hidden behind my porch light, I finally caught the culprit in 4K clarity. Karen herself, marching across the street in her floral housecoat and foam slippers at the crack of dawn, pushing over my can with the smug satisfaction of a child kicking down a sand. She even looked both ways, as if daring the universe to stop her, then strutted back to her yard as if she had done a great deed for the community. I couldn't believe it. Grown woman, HOA board member, terrorizing me with trash cans. My first instinct was to storm across the street and confront her. But if there's one thing you learn quickly about HOA tyrants, it's that confrontation only fuels them. They thrive on drama, feeding off the rage of their neighbors like vampires in cul-de-sacs. No, I needed a plan. Something subtle. Something that would make her think twice before touching my property ever again. I spent days pondering my options. Some neighbors suggested just reporting her to the HOA board. But considering she practically was the board, that would go nowhere. Others told me to ignore it, but after cleaning up coffee grounds and soggy cereal from the street 3 weeks in a row, ignoring it wasn't an option. Then, while sipping my coffee one Saturday morning, I remembered a video I had seen online, someone rigging their trash can with a motion-activated air horn to scare off raccoons. The idea hit me like lightning. If Karen wanted to keep knocking over my trash can, maybe it was time the trash can knocked back. The plan was simple, at least in concept. Rig the can with a harmless but startling surprise that only activated when someone pushed it over. I wanted something legal, something non-destructive, but something that would leave a lasting impression. I started researching online, spending my evenings deep in DIY forums, watching prank videos, and sketching out designs in a notebook. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. For once, I wasn't the victim of Karen's HOA tyranny. I was about to become the architect of her downfall. By Sunday night, I had my plan locked in. All I needed were the parts: a motion sensor, a small but loud speaker, and one of those novelty prank recordings you could load with custom sounds. I also picked up a canister of biodegradable confetti, just to add flair. Over the next few days, I worked in my garage late into the night, rigging the contraption together like some suburban mad scientist. My wife shook her head but secretly enjoyed watching me dive into this project, muttering things like, "This is either going to get us fined or make you a legend." By Tuesday evening, everything was ready. I wheeled the special trash can to the curb, heart pounding like I was setting a trap in a spy thriller. I didn't even have to wait long. At 6:07 a.m. Wednesday, just as the early morning light began to creep across the street, Karen emerged. Camera rolling, coffee in her hand, smug grin plastered on her face. She strutted toward my can like she had every other week. She didn't hesitate, didn't pause, didn't even glance around. She gave the can her usual shove, and in that exact moment, the motion sensor triggered. Out blasted the most piercing, banshee-like scream I could find on the internet, accompanied by a burst of confetti that shot straight into the air like a celebratory firework. The sound echoed down the street like a demon being exorcised. And Karen, poor Karen stumbled back so fast she dropped her coffee all over her robe, shrieking like she'd seen a ghost. Her slippers skidded on the wet pavement as she scrambled back toward her house, arms flailing, confetti raining down around her like she had just been crowned the queen of humiliation. Neighbors peered out from windows, some even stepping outside to see what the noise was, and I swear I saw two of them stifling laughter. The trash can, unbothered, sat proudly upright, as if mocking her retreat. I sipped my coffee from my porch, barely able to contain my grin. For once, Karen had no control, no superiority, just embarrassment. She disappeared inside her house, and didn't come back out that morning, not even to move her own trash can. The garbage truck came, emptied mine without issue, and rolled away, leaving the street a little cleaner than usual, both literally and figuratively. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Karen was humiliated, yes, but people like her don't give up. No, this was just the opening act in what was about to become the strangest trash war Willow Creek had ever seen. For the rest of that week, Karen avoided eye contact with me, which in itself was a small miracle, but I knew her silence was only temporary, the calm before the storm. People like her didn't just crawl back into their shells and admit defeat, no. They regrouped, re-strategized, and came back swinging twice as hard. Sure enough, by the following Monday, I found a letter tucked under my doormat, written in that passive-aggressive HOA stationery with the gold trim and fake cursive header that read, "Notice of violation, the offense, excessive noise disturbance, originating from your trash receptacle device." I had to read it 3 times before it fully sank. Karen had actually reported me for the prank. She had triggered by tipping over my can. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the paper, because in the very complaint itself, she had unknowingly confessed to tampering with my property. Still, the letter warned that any future incidents could result in a $200 fine, and while I wasn't afraid of paying a few bucks to keep this war going, I realized this was Karen's opening counterattack. I could already imagine her plotting from across the street, probably pacing her kitchen in her robe, drafting more violation letters, cooking up new schemes to drive me crazy. But what she didn't realize was that she had awoken a version of me she hadn't seen before. I was done being the quiet, compliant neighbor. If Karen wanted a war, I was prepared to fight it on all fronts, and I wasn't about to lose. That night, I pulled out my notebook again, jotting down ideas not just for defense, but for escalation. My mind buzzed with possibilities. Fake HOA violation letters I could slip back under her door. Motion sensor sprinklers that would soak her whenever she set foot near my yard. Even the idea of repainting my fence neon orange just to watch her implode. But the idea that stuck with me most was psychological warfare using her own obsessive nature against her. Karen thrived on control. The moment she felt out of control, she unraveled. So instead of just protecting my trash can, I needed to make her fear it, to the point where even looking at it would give her anxiety. That Wednesday, I set the stage. I swapped out the confetti cannon for something new, a simple motion speaker hidden inside the can, programmed to whisper phrases I recorded in my deepest, creepiest voice. Nothing violent or threatening, just vague, unsettling lines like, "I see you, Karen, and leave me alone, Karen." It wasn't loud, just enough to be heard when she leaned close or touched the can. I also positioned my porch camera at the perfect angle to capture every moment. Sure enough, Wednesday morning came, and there she was again, back in her robe, face set with determination. She hesitated slightly, probably remembering last week's scream and confetti, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. She stepped up to the can, gave it her usual shove, and froze as the whisper hissed out, "I see you, Karen." Her entire body stiffened. She glanced around wildly, clutching her robe tighter, then leaned closer as if her ears had deceived her. The can whispered again, "Leave me alone, Karen." That was all it took. She bolted like a track runner, tripping over her own slippers, sprinting back across the street as though my trash can had become possessed. I was in tears laughing, so hard on the porch, and the video footage, absolutely priceless. But this time, I didn't just keep it for myself. No, I sent it anonymously to the Willow Creek neighborhood group chat, the one Karen practically lived in, the one where she constantly posted about violations and standards. Within an hour, neighbors were flooding the chat with laughing emojis, comments like "haunted trash can strikes again," and "Karen, the can doesn't like you," even joking suggestions about calling a priest for an exorcism. Karen never responded, which only fueled the fire. By the afternoon, the video had spread across the neighborhood like wildfire, and for the first time since I'd moved in, Karen wasn't the one in control of the narrative, she was the punchline. I half expected her to storm over and scream at me, but instead, she retreated. Curtains drawn, no morning strolls, no porch gossip sessions with the other board members. It was quiet. Too quiet. And quiet from Karen never meant surrender, it meant plotting. That Friday, I found my mailbox stuffed with another violation notice. This one listing 4 infractions: trash receptacle modifications, improper disposal of biodegradable substances, unauthorized recording devices on property, and, my favorite behavior, unbecoming of a Willow Creek resident. The absurdity was comical, but it also told me she was desperate. She was throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping something would stick. That's when it hit me. Karen wasn't just trying to control me, she was afraid that if she didn't, she would lose her grip on the entire neighborhood. She ruled through fear, through fines, through embarrassing people into submission. But now, with one trash can prank and a few whispers, her image had cracked. The neighbors were laughing at her instead of fearing her, and that was a death blow to her ego. I realized I didn't need to outprank her every time. What I needed to do was let her destroy herself. And so, I planted the seeds. That weekend, I casually mentioned to a few neighbors that Karen had been acting strange around my trash can, that maybe she was hearing voices or seeing things, that I was a little worried about her. I said it with genuine concern in my voice, the kind that spreads gossip faster than wildfire. By Monday, 3 different people had already brought it up in the group chat. "Has anyone checked on Karen? She's been acting off lately." "Yeah, I saw her yelling at a trash can the other day. Do you think she's okay?" The shift was palpable. Karen, the enforcer, the iron-fisted ruler of Willow Creek, was now the subject of whispered pity, and nothing would drive her crazier than the idea that her power had turned into mockery. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving in Willow Creek, I was winning. But even as I celebrated, I knew one thing for certain. Karen wasn't done yet. No, this was just round 2 in a much bigger game, and, judging by the glare she shot me through her blinds that evening, she was about to come back swinging harder than ever. The following week began with an eerie sense of anticipation, as if the entire neighborhood was waiting for Karen's next move, and I didn't have to wait long to see what she had cooked up. On Tuesday night, when I wheeled my trash can to the curb, I noticed something strange. Her trash can was already out, positioned perfectly, lid tightly sealed, but there was a smugness about its placement that made me suspicious. Sure enough, when I woke up at 5:30 the next morning, I saw her crouched across the street in her driveway, peeking from behind her car like a commando in some low-budget action film. She was waiting for me to reveal my next trick, ready to catch me in the act of defending my own trash. I almost laughed out loud right there, because the image of a middle-aged woman, in slippers and curlers, hiding behind a sedan just to outwit a garbage bin, was beyond ridiculous. But I kept my cool and played it casual. I made coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the show unfold. At 6:15, the garbage truck came rumbling down the street, headlights glaring, brakes squealing, and when it stopped in front of my house, the driver did his usual routine: hooked the can, flipped it, dumped it, set it back. But then the driver frowned, got out, and walked over to inspect something taped to the side of my can. Curious, I went down the steps and saw it too, a giant laminated HOA citation taped to my trash can in big red letters. The driver shook his head and muttered, "Never seen that before," before tossing the sign aside and driving off. I picked up the citation, and immediately knew it was Karen's work. It wasn't official HOA paperwork, just a cheap imitation. She'd printed on her home computer, complete with fake rules like trash can must be color-coordinated with house paint, and all receptacles must be free of mechanical modifications. She had even stamped the bottom with a knockoff HOA seal she must have drawn in Microsoft Paint. It was so ridiculous that I burst out laughing on the curb, loud enough that Karen, still crouched behind her car, shot up like a startled meerkat, and scurried inside red-faced. I knew right then she was unraveling, but instead of stopping, she doubled down. That evening, I discovered she had filed an official complaint with the HOA, accusing me of creating a hostile living environment, with intentionally disruptive trash receptacle modifications. The HOA board, being mostly her and 2 of her loyal cronies, actually scheduled a hearing to review my violations. I knew it was a kangaroo court, but I wasn't worried. I had my ace in the hole. The videos, every whisper, every scream, every piece of footage of her knocking over my can was stored safely on my hard drive, ready to be played for the entire neighborhood if she pushed too far. But the part that really lit a fire under me was when I found out Karen had gone door-to-door over the weekend, handing out pamphlets about neighborhood sanitation standards and trying to recruit support against me. Several neighbors later told me they took the pamphlets just to make her leave, then tossed them straight in the trash. One even said, "She seemed more obsessed with your can than with the actual garbage pickup schedule." That comment gave me an idea. If Karen wanted to obsess over my trash can, I'd make sure it consumed her completely. The next week, I upgraded the prank. Instead of just whispers, I installed a small Bluetooth speaker inside the can that I could control remotely. I also printed a fake maintenance schedule that I taped to the side, listing absurd inspection times like 4:12 a.m. noise test and 11:47 p.m. paranormal activity check. The neighbors loved it. A few even took pictures and shared them in the group chat with captions like, "New HOA rules." Karen, of course, was livid. She stormed across the street that Wednesday, pamphlet in one hand, phone in the other, recording herself for evidence. She pointed at my trash can, shouting about illegal modifications and disruptive elements. Right on cue, I tapped my phone, and the speaker inside the can growled, "Karen, go home." Her face turned white as a sheet. She screamed at the top of her lungs, dropped the pamphlet, and bolted back across the street, phone shaking in her hand as she tried to keep recording. By the time she slammed her door, half the neighborhood had gathered on their porches, watching like it was reality TV. Kids were laughing, parents were shaking their heads, and I stood there sipping my coffee like a man who had just tamed a wild animal. But here's the thing, I could see the desperation in her eyes before she fled. She wasn't just embarrassed anymore, she was obsessed. Later that night, as I was locking up the house, I glanced out the window and caught her again, lurking on her porch, binoculars in hand, aimed straight at my trash can. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. It was official. Karen had lost her grip. What I didn't know then, however, was that she was about to take things far beyond pranks and fake citations. The very next day, I found a letter not just in my mailbox, but in every single mailbox on the street. It was a typed, 2-page manifesto accusing me of endangering the community with reckless technology and harboring unsanitary receptacles that attract vermin. She even suggested that my trash can could be a public health hazard requiring immediate removal. Neighbors laughed at the letter, some even mocking her in the group chat. But I saw something else in it. She was trying to rally the HOA into an official vote to fine me or even remove my can altogether. It was insane, but with Karen, insanity was always on the table. That night, my wife asked me if I was worried. I shrugged and said, no, because Karen doesn't realize she's digging her own grave. The more she pushes, the more ridiculous she looks. At some point, even the HOA won't be able to back her. Still, I knew I couldn't just sit back anymore. If she wanted to escalate, then I needed to be ready with something she'd never see coming. Something that would end the trash wars once and for all. And as I stared at my can under the glow of the street lamp, an idea began to form, bigger, bolder, and far more humiliating than anything I had done so far. If Karen wanted to make my trash can the centerpiece of the neighborhood, then I was about to make sure it became her worst nightmare. By the time the next week rolled around, the entire neighborhood was buzzing with anticipation about Trash Can Wednesday, a phrase that had become a running joke thanks to Karen's antics and my increasingly elaborate countermeasures. Some families even set their alarms early just to catch a glimpse of whatever drama might unfold, sipping coffee on their porches as if they were front-row spectators at a circus. Karen hated that she had lost control of the narrative, hated that people were laughing at her, and most of all hated that I wasn't bending to her will. She tried to reclaim authority by announcing an emergency HOA meeting to address the so-called trash can crisis, plastering notices on lampposts like some self-appointed town crier. Of course, when the meeting actually happened in the community center, only 6 people showed up, and 4 of them came just for the free donuts. I went too, just to watch the meltdown, and it was worth every second. Karen stood at the front with a PowerPoint presentation labeled Operation Restore Cleanliness, complete with bullet points like eradicate disruptive receptacles and reclaim neighborhood pride. She even had a slide with a zoom photo of my trash can circled in red, like it was a suspect in a police lineup. When one neighbor asked, "Isn't this just your personal vendetta?" Karen's face turned scarlet, and she sputtered something about community standards, before abruptly ending the meeting in a huff. By that point, even her loyal cronies were rolling their eyes. I walked out smiling, because I knew her credibility was crumbling faster than a stale cookie. But just when I thought she couldn't get any more unhinged, Wednesday morning delivered a plot twist I didn't see coming. At exactly 6 a.m., I heard the sound of engines outside and looked out my window to see not just the garbage truck, but also a white pickup truck pulling a trailer. Out of the trailer came 2 men in matching uniforms labeled Waste Solutions and Removal, hired contractors clearly brought in by Karen. She stood on her porch like a general overseeing her troops, arms crossed, smirking as if she had finally outplayed me. The men walked straight toward my trash can with tools in hand, apparently under orders to seize it and haul it away. My blood boiled. This wasn't just a prank anymore, this was outright theft of my property. I stormed outside and demanded to know what they were doing, and one of the men said, "Ma'am, across the street says this can is unauthorized. We've been contracted by the HOA to remove it." Karen shouted across the street, "It's for the good of the neighborhood." That was the last straw. I pulled out my phone and hit play on the videos I'd been saving, showing Karen knocking over my can, taping fake citations to it, and screaming when it whispered her name. I held the phone up so both contractors could see, and their expressions shifted from confusion to barely contained laughter. "Ma'am," one of them called back to Karen, "this seems like a personal issue, not a waste issue." She screeched at them to just do their job, but the men shrugged, got back in their truck, and drove off, leaving Karen fuming on the sidewalk. That alone would have been victory enough. But fate wasn't done with her yet. The garbage truck driver, who had been watching the whole spectacle, pulled up to my curb, emptied my can as usual, and then rolled slowly toward Karen's side. As he lifted her can, the bottom split open, dumping a week's worth of her garbage half-eaten takeout, soggy paper towels, and what looked like a mountain of expired yogurt to her pristine driveway. The timing was so perfect it felt orchestrated by the universe itself. The neighbors watching from their porches erupted in laughter, some even applauding, and Karen stood frozen, mouth hanging open, as the garbage truck rumbled away without so much as an apology. I couldn't have scripted it better if I tried. By that afternoon, the group chat was ablaze with memes, photos of Karen standing in her driveway surrounded by her own trash. Captions like "Karma Can" and "Neighborhood Cleanup Program." Phase Karen. She didn't respond, of course, but I knew she was seething inside her house, curtains drawn like a castle under siege. I almost felt sorry for her but Karen wasn't finished. That night, just after midnight, I heard rustling outside and peeked through the blinds. There she was, creeping across my lawn with a flashlight, as if she thought no one would notice. She knelt down beside my trash can, fiddling with something, and scurried back across the street. The next morning, when I went out to inspect, I found what she had done. She had plastered giant neon orange hazard stickers all over the can, reading "Toxic waste and hazard do not approach." It was so ridiculous, I burst out laughing, but then I realized she had gone one step further. She had also taped an envelope to the side with another violation letter, this one demanding that I remove the receptacle within 24 hours or face a $500 fine. My wife shook her head, muttering, "She's lost it," and I couldn't have agreed more. But instead of ripping it all off in anger, I decided to flip the script. I left the stickers on, but added my own bright neon green, ones that said "Haunted Approach at Your Own Risk." I even put a fake biohazard symbol on the lid for effect. By the time neighbors walked their dogs that morning, my trash can looked like a cross between a science experiment and a horror movie prop, and they loved it. One even told me, "Honestly, this is the most entertainment this neighborhood has had in years." Karen, watching from her porch, looked like she was about to explode. Her plan to humiliate me had backfired yet again, and now the neighborhood was laughing harder than ever. That day, I knew I had broken her last defense. Her ability to convince others she was right. She could scream, she could fine, she could tape all the stickers in the world. But the neighbors no longer took her seriously, and that was the ultimate revenge. Still, I had a feeling she would try one final desperate move. Something wild. Something over the top, because people like Karen never bow out gracefully. As I wheeled my decorated trash can back up the driveway that evening, I couldn't help but grin. Whatever she had planned, I was ready, and I was going to make sure. Her last attempt at control became the most humiliating moment of her HOA career. The following Wednesday arrived like the climax of a movie, with the entire neighborhood waiting for Karen's last stand. And I could feel it in the air. This wasn't going to be another petty prank or fake citation. She had been too quiet. Since the hazard stickers fiasco, and with Karen, silence was never a good sign. At 5:45 a.m., I poured my coffee, stepped onto the porch, and braced myself. Sure enough, moments later, her front door swung open, and out she came, not in her robe and slippers this time, but in full regalia, as if she had prepared for battle. A stiff blazer, clipboard clutched in her hand, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, even though the sun hadn't fully risen yet. Behind her trailed two other HOA board members, looking tired and uncomfortable, like they had been dragged into this against their will. And behind them, to my shock, came a local police officer, clearly summoned by Karen to give her operation the appearance of legitimacy. My heart skipped a beat, but then I noticed the officer's expression, polite but skeptical, the kind of look that said, "I can't believe I'm wasting my shift on this nonsense." Karen marched across the street like a dictator about to give orders, pointing dramatically at my trash can and declaring, "Officer, there is the offending receptacle. It has caused nothing but disruption, and must be removed at once under HOA Regulation 14B. The officer tilted his head, glanced at the can, which, at that point, was still proudly wearing its "Haunted Approach at Your Own Risk" stickers, and then back at me. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "is this true? Have you been modifying your trash can in a way that violates community law?" I smiled, held up my phone, and replied, "Not at all, officer. In fact, I have hours of footage showing this woman." I pointed to Karen, trespassing on my property, vandalizing my trash can, and filing fake violation notices. The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued, and asked to see the evidence. Oh, I was ready. I pulled up the best clips. Karen tipping over my can in broad daylight, Karen screaming when the whispers spooked her, Karen plastering fake citations and hazard stickers, and even Karen sneaking across my yard at midnight with a flashlight. Each video played with perfect clarity, and as they did, the HOA board members shifted uncomfortably, the officer's jaw tightened, and the small crowd of neighbors that had gathered began murmuring and laughing. By the time the last clip finished, one where Karen dropped her coffee and ran, shrieking from the confetti cannon, the officer was shaking his head in disbelief. "Ma'am," he said sternly, turning to her, "you've been harassing your neighbor, tampering with his property, and wasting police time with false reports. This needs to stop immediately." Karen's face went redder than I'd ever seen, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. But he's breaking the rules. The candidate talks to me. That was it. The crowd burst into laughter, neighbors clutching their stomachs, some even recording the scene on their phones. The officer pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered, "Ma'am, unless the trash can is going to file a statement, I think this conversation is over." The HOA board members, clearly fed up, mumbled excuses and slinked away, leaving Karen standing alone on the curb, shaking with rage and humiliation. She tried to salvage it by shouting, "You'll all regret this. This neighborhood is going to collapse without standards." But her voice cracked halfway through, and the laughter only grew louder. The officer gave me a nod, told me to have a good day, and left, leaving Karen to retreat into her house like a defeated villain in the final act of a play. From that day forward, Karen was never the same. She stopped coming to meetings, stopped patrolling the neighborhood, and most importantly, stopped touching my trash can. Rumor had it she even tried to resign from the HOA board, though technically she never submitted the paperwork, probably too embarrassed to face anyone. Her blinds stayed closed most days, and when she did venture out, she avoided eye contact with everyone, as if she were the neighborhood ghost instead of its dictator. And as for me, well, I became something of a legend in Willow Creek. Neighbors would stop by just to chat about the trash can war. Kids would dare each other to walk past Karen's house and whisper, "I see you, Karen." And the garbage truck drivers even started giving me a thumbs up each week. My trash can, once just a mundane necessity, had become a symbol of resistance against HOA tyranny, standing proudly at the curb every Wednesday like a monument to victory. But here's the best part. About a month later, I got an anonymous letter. In my mailbox, scrawled in handwriting, I instantly recognized. It read, "You win. Just keep your trash can away from me." I laughed so hard I nearly fell over. Karen had admitted defeat, not in public, of course, but in private, where her pride couldn't shield her anymore. And that was enough for me. In the end, I didn't just protect my trash can, I protected my right to live peacefully in my own home without constant harassment from a power-hungry neighbor. Willow Creek slowly returned to normal, quieter and friendlier than it had been in years. And every time I wheeled my can to the curb, I did it with a smile, knowing that sometimes, the best way to fight back against petty tyranny isn't anger or confrontation, but a little creativity, a little humor, and a lot of patience. Karen never knocked over my trash can again, and to this day, whenever I hear the garbage truck rumble down the street, I can't help but grin, because in the strangest, funniest way imaginable, I won a war with nothing more than a trash can and a refusal to be pushed around.